whether to use heart rate or power as a guide to pacing your endurance cycling or your endurance running event is a bit of a tricky conundrum. My name is John Hampshire, I'm an endurance cycling and running coach. Claire and I use virtual tools to coach athletes from all over the world. I post a video every Tuesday, so please like and subscribe so they get notified of the next one. Assuming you like this video and find it useful. I hope you do. So briefly, heart rate and power. Heart rate's a physiological metric, and the faster the heart rate, the harder you're working. But there are a lot of variables that impact on heart rate, so it's not that great a tool when you start to get tired. And power is the direct measure of how much power you're producing. Power meters on bikes measure the force that you're applying to the pedals and combine that with how fast the pedals are moving to give you the power output from your body or the power input to the bike. In running, there's an analog to power, running power, but that's not quite as good because it's not a direct measurement. So running power is not as good as cycling power. We're going to use a worked example from LEL, London Edinburgh London, last time, 2022, and one of the riders that I coached. Fortunately, he had a really good set of data that we can interrogate, and it's quite surprising how heart rate and power interrelate. So if you're doing a multi-day event, how you approach the metrics could be different to if you're doing a single-day event. Heart rate is quite a simple metric. A lot of people have heart rate monitors on the watch or an armband, which works quite nicely if you don't like a chest strap. And the armbands and the chest straps transmit to either to your watch or a cycling head unit. And you can set heart rate based training zones proportional to your maximum heart rate, what's known as your heart rate reserve, the difference between your resting heart rate and your maximum heart rate, or your threshold heart rate, which is the heart rate that you can sustain for maybe 40 to 60 minutes. And then using that, you can set training zones. And it's a good estimate of effort to a point. One of the problems with heart rate is it's affected by lots of other factors, like if it's hot, heart rate is typically higher. If you're more aroused, you're more excited, like you might be in an event, then your heart rate is typically higher. So the values that you've picked up from your training for pacing might not be relevant in your event when you're a bit more excited. Also, when you get tired, your heart rate can vary. Quite often you get what's known as heart rate decoupling, which means that your heart rate increases even if you maintain the same intensity for a period of time, usually a few hours. And you can see that in the first day of the LEL ride, quite a big decoupling effect. But also heart rate gets depressed when you're tired. So if you look at the second day of the LEL ride, there's almost no decoupling and the heart rates come down, the average heart rates for the day come down day to day, even though the powers don't come down quite as much. So you can see that as a rider gets tired, the heart rate response becomes more and more depressed. Power is a much more direct measure of how hard you're working, but not a physiological measure. It's a measure of how much work you're doing, external work, external to your body. So you can calibrate power, you can create training zones for power, usually based on what's known as the FTP. There have been various studies showing that FTP at the end of a Grand Tour, like the Tour of Spain, is much lower. VO2 maxes are lower, heart rate responses are lower, everything's lower at the end. So power or heart rate is subject to these reductions in thresholds over a period of a multi-day event. So as you can see, neither metric is perfect. And also the more experienced you are in longer events, the higher proportion of your threshold you can sustain for the duration of the event. And also you recover faster. So if you're doing a multi-day event, you'll be able to sustain a higher power or even a higher heart rate on the second day and the third day than somebody who's not quite as experienced. So the only way to know what you can do is to know what you have done and make some sort of extrapolation to what you think you'll be able to do. And a good way to do that is understand what it feels like to work at a certain intensity, at the intensity that you know you can sustain. And a good starting point is the upper end of your training zone 2. So whether you're using power or heart rate for your training zones, do some riding, do your endurance rides in training zone 2 and get a feel for what that is like. And then you start to understand the feel of what you can sustain, and then you can use that, because although your perceived exertion for a given power or heart rate will go up during your event as you get tired, remember that your thresholds are also going down. So if you can maintain a good level of how hard it feels, then that's quite a good guide of how fast to go. So really you want to be calibrating your perceived exertion using heart rate and power, and then use perceived exertion during your event, and don't worry too much about heart rate and power. Just use those as a guide to see how things are going and give you a bit of a sense check. You just have to learn to listen to your body, understand how your body responds, and go with that. So get out there and experiment for yourself. Do some longer rides, do some practice rides, do some practice runs, and learn what works for you. And let us know, let me know in the comments. If you want to discuss any of this and how we might be able to help you, then please book a 20-minute consultation with me using the link in the description. It's totally free, there's no commitment either way. Sign up, have a chat, and see where we end up. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.